Hi, my name is Joe Jackson. I'm a journalist, author, interviewer, and broadcaster who's interviewed roughly 1,400 celebrities over a 30-year period for all major media outlets in Ireland and many abroad. What follows is the third and final part of a series of 3 podcasts based on an interview I did with Neil Diamond roughly 20 years ago in his studio in New York. The interview was done for a radio program I presented at the time, in which I looked back at the original musical influences in an artist's life, and we then followed that trajectory throughout their career to highlight how, where, and when those influences manifested themselves in their own music. So let's pick up on the conversation with Neil at the point where we were discussing some of his own songs. And by the way, if you want to read articles I wrote based on my 3 interviews with Neil Diamond, check my website, joejacksoninterviewer.com. I've talked a lot about, and a lot of your songs that people, you'll do a lot of the early songs in concert. Do you ever feel frustrated that some of the albums, like we're going to talk about the new album, that the new album seems not to hook into the same amount of people, or maybe doesn't get radio support, or does stuff like that? Do you ever feel, here I am, I'm still writing as good as, or different songs, I wish they were as loved or as accepted as the early stuff?
I do feel that way. The radio support is not there, especially since, videos came about, and, which I hate, and I hate doing. I hate the whole filming process. It's not satisfying to me. So
you did a movie, and it was very successful. A lot of
I did a
fans like
movie, and it was successful, but I did it only because it was a way to expose the music.
Right.
Even the title had music in it, the jazz singer,
Right.
It gave me a chance to write music. That's the only reason I did it. If it had no music in it, I wouldn't have been involved.
Okay.
It was a musical movie, and that's what I'm all about. I'll do almost anything to get the music out there and get it to people.
But you hate doing videos?
I hate videos and I hate film. It's a really horrendous process. It's hard work. Being an actor is probably the hardest work there is. It's exhausting. It's mentally exhausting. There's no fun involved in it. You're at the behest of the director, who really has all the fun in the filmmaking process. When he says it's right, that's when you're finished.
Right.
If he doesn't say it's right, you keep doing it until he says it's right. And it's no fun.
Were you? I don't know if it's the story about you and Laurence Olivier on the set where you said you couldn't say a particular line, that I don't sing, something to do with making money. I don't sing to make money, and he just told you, it's acting, chap, or something. I don't know what it was, that you didn't feel a particular line in the script would sat right in your mouth.
I asked. Well, he immediately demanded that I call him Larry, which is, a joke. But I mean, he's the greatest living actor in the world, and I imposed on him a lot to ask him what I do in this situation. How do I work with this actor in that scene? How do I read this line? What do I do? I was very inexperienced, and he was the greatest of all. And he was a generous man. He told me. He was brutally honest. As a matter of fact, his nickname for me around the film was the Money. That's what he called me. I was the money, which meant that I was the one.
Right.
I was the one who got the film made.
Right.
So
because you were involved, it was backable by whomever.
Exactly.
Right.
And it was a great experience. It taught me to be a better musician. It informed my music. Taught me to be a better songwriter, to be a better performer, to understand how to express myself better. But it was a very difficult process. I was exhausted. I was totally burned out. We had 70 days of shooting. I was in 69 of those days. And on my day off, for some reason, I went down to the set just to see how everybody was doing. But it was very, very hard. I was exhausted. I wanted to quit. I wanted to just pay them off and say, forget about it. I don't want it. But I didn't have the heart to do it. I couldn't explain to my son, Jesse, how I quit. I didn't want to set an example for him that I quit. And so in your life, if something's hard, you can quit too.
All right.
It was a bad example for me to give Jesse. And I stuck with it to a large part because of that. The hours are horrendous. You get up at 4:30 in the morning. You have to study your lines. You have to memorize all this stuff. And I hadn't done memorization since I was in school.
Okay.
And suddenly I'm memorizing pages of dialogue, and I would practice them with Jesse, and he would have them memorized immediately, and here I was, I could just barely memorize the
All right.
things, and I
Okay.
was and that's very important for an actor. You have to memorize it to the point that you don't even think about it. It becomes part of you, and you just read the
Right.
line and you express it. So memorization was a very difficult process for me, aside from the process of making films, which is you come in the morning, you block the scene with other people. Wonderful. The lighting director, the director of photography, and the other actors. You block the scene out. This is what works. This is how we're going to do it. Then you go off and you get made up and you get dressed, and then you wait
Sure.
till the
Yeah.
lighting guy puts the lamps where he wants them, and the director of photography gets his cameras set up, and I mean, it's a huge endeavor. And then they call you back. They give you 10 minutes notice, and you have to be right on the mark when they call you back. Sometimes they didn't call me back until 4 in the afternoon when they had the whole thing set up and were ready to do the scene. And I've been sitting around there all day in makeup, in costume, waiting basically for my call. And I had to be on the mark, and so did every other actor. It was an exhausting process. And Olivier, who had done it so often in the past and was the consummate pro, uh, it never troubled him. This was his milieu, and I remember so clearly. First of all, being an actor is like being a laborer. In Hollywood, you have to check in with a card when
All
you
right.
come in the morning, whether you're Neil Diamond or Laurence Olivier or some guy who's got 2 words to say. You got a card and you check it in, and it says that's when this actor
All right.
showed up. It's very much a union kind of a thing. And you check out at the end of the day. You can't leave until you're dismissed by the director. And I would go home and I'd be an empty shell. I was
Right.
exhausted. I couldn't eat. I couldn't, I was just totally exhausted. Because it was a new process for me. And Olivier would go back to his hotel. He would swim laps. This man was 78 years
Yeah.
old. He would swim laps. He would get dressed and go out and have dinner with friends. And I was just barely able to walk up to my room and fall into bed.
Right. Okay.
So it was very disheartening
Okay.
for me.
I from all this, I imagine you won't be rushing to make a new movie this summer.
Not unless it's got music in it, and not unless it's got a reason,
All right. Okay.
But it's something I'm not chasing
It's not your
after.
milieu.
Absolutely not.
Hi, Joe Jackson here again. I thank you for listening to this edition of the Joe Jackson Interviews podcast. And don't forget, if you want to read any of the articles I wrote about Neil Diamond and countless other celebrities, check out my website, joejacksoninterviewer.com. And if you like, subscribe to either my podcast on any podcast server or the visualized version on YouTube.